Greetings, everyone. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Sorry I'm so late. Sorry I am so late again. I was on Katie Halper's call-in program. She asked me to come on, and so I thought I would oblige, because, Katie's a good friend of this show, good friend of the work that I've done, and surely I like to try to contribute to her really good work. So I appreciated that. And I appreciate you all waiting, waiting here, well past the start time. Sorry about that. Generally, hey, look, I am one of the more punctual. I am a punctual streamer. I'm punctual on here. So, uh, 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 you know, please give me a break. Please cut me some slack. I appreciate it. I'm gonna make I'm gonna make a moderator for the chat because I know there's been some issues, so I'm going to do that real quick. Like the stream, everyone. As you're coming in, like the video. How do I sound? Please do give me a sound check. I'm going to add a moderator here. There we go. So Big Teal, if you're there, I think I made you the moderator. I don't know how it really works, but you showed me, and I appreciate your volunteering to do that for me. So yeah, all right, let's get to it because I do have to cut this one a bit short. Probably, I usually do 90 minutes at the minimum. I'm hoping that I can keep this to within an hour. I'm going to respond to what happened today and go over some of the responses and some things that I think we should take into consideration. And perhaps if I can get that all done in 45 minutes, I want to cover 15 minutes of something our good friend Barack Obama has said in relation to the Al Qaeda leader who was assassinated by drone strike by the United States. I believe that was yesterday, right? So, like the video, everyone. Like the video, hit that notifications bell. Subscription button, hit the notifications bell. And as I said yesterday, I am looking to build up my Patreon because as I meet my goal each month, it's kind of like, the economic crisis, people's struggles kind of bring me back down. And so please do support this work at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. I'm right there, and I appreciate everyone who's been able to support me. And I really do hope that as you are viewing this work, if you do enjoy it, if you do enjoy the consistent anti-imperialist, theoretical framework to news developments, to historical developments, to these critical questions, then please do support at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. So let's get right to it, guys. Let's get right to it because I know it's late. It's late for me. Last night was a marathon. I didn't get much sleep last night, so I'm like I've been kind of half awake all day. But uh, uh, thank you, Standing Alone. Thank you for recommending. And yeah, if you can join Patreon, please do, because I love the enthusiasm. I need to get more guests on my call, and that reminds me, as I'm on Katie Halper, I need to get her. I need to get the people on. There are a lot of people who help support my work. I need to definitely pay it back, right? Because that's the kind of person I want to be. So I have these headphones on just because if there might be something we listen to, there might not be. So, maybe it's a cool look. It's kind of crooked though. All right, let's get right to this. So today, Nancy Pelosi touched down in Taiwan. She touched down in Taiwan. So she did so, I believe it was around 10:11 p.m. at night in terms of China time. It was 10:11 a.m. in terms of our time today. And people were waiting with bated breath about what would happen, right? Because a lot of people believed that what China was saying was that the consequences would be severe and they would be very direct, and they possibly would be military in character in terms of how they would address Pelosi's aircraft and the aircraft that was escorting her into Taiwan. And so I think it's important, for one, to just reiterate this trip, regardless of how China responded here, was always incredibly dangerous. Just the idea of it violated the one China policy and placed US-China relations perhaps at their lowest point than they ever have been in one single move. Now, of course, we can't negate the context of all of this. We can't negate the fact that the United States has been militarizing the region, militarizing Taiwan, sanctioning China, has been provoking China at every turn, propaganda, in terms of diplomacy, in terms of every single avenue, every single arena of relations. The United States has been provoking China, and China has been incredibly patient, incredibly restrained. So when this was all happening in the People's Liberation Army, China's foreign ministry, were all saying this is dangerous. If Pelosi touches down, there will be consequences. A lot of people thought, well, China is going to start something. And I think a lot of that is because Russia's special military operation in Ukraine shocked the world. And it shocked even many of us who were not able to, because of just how complex um, back channel strategy, all of that is. And because we're not on the ground, we can't necessarily know exactly how a country like Russia and China will react to these provocations. A lot of us, uh, perhaps, we're thinking, well, if Russia is going to respond the way it did in Ukraine, then China, of course, with this kind of provocation, is going to respond with incredible military force, right? There were jokes about Pelosi's plane being shot down. And then there were a lot of people who were disappointed in how China reacted. And I just want to first say this: China's reaction was actually very important for us to learn from. For one, China did not take the bait. What Nancy Pelosi is doing here, what Nancy Pelosi and her ruling class backers are doing here, is they are trying to drag China into the very identity that they've tried to impose upon it for years on years now. This new Cold War is about turning China into some kind of aggressor so that aggressive imperialist policy led by the United States is justified. That's what it's all about. They've done the same thing to Russia, but with China, it's been to an even more intense degree because you have a non-white population. I believe Russia's non-white too, by the way. But you have a non-white population of 1.4 billion people under a socialist governance system in a prosperous, growing economy that's going to surpass the United States. So I believe the attacks have been even more egregious, more significant and severe. They don't get as much of attention, but even more significant and severe, and with more of a U.S. footprint on it because the U.S. has outsourced a lot of its aggression against Russia to its European allies, especially in this particular juncture. But, and of course, with NATO being such a consolidated military alliance of the United States. But what China did in this scenario was both respond with strength as well as with patience. And this is consistent with how China has viewed its relationship to the United States and has viewed world politics and the situation that we're in over the past several years. China never had any hope to shoot down Pelosi's plane, right? And I believe that because of fuel concerns and because of concerns about how the U.S. would react, I believe that's the reason why we didn't see the People's Liberation Army and its Air Force come out and greet Pelosi in the air and greet the aircraft and try to divert it. But I do think that by responding strongly and putting all of that on the table only strengthened the reaction that they did have. And what was China's reaction? Well, it was first to condemn what has happened. You condemn it strongly. And then you state, China's foreign ministry has stated this, the People's Liberation Army has stated this, you state that this action will have a plethora of consequences, long-term consequences that will be now enacted in the short term. So what did China do? China said, we condemn this action and we are responding. August 4th, there will be military exercises all across the Taiwan Straits surrounding the island. This is going to be the biggest military exercise that the PLA has carried out there since the third Taiwan Straits crisis in 1996. So that's going to happen on August 4th. And who knows how long it will continue. There'll be live fire ammunition. there will be a demonstration of force to show that China can and will reunify the country, reunify Taiwan with China by force if the United States continues to play the Taiwan card. However, it will continue to uphold the one China policy and perhaps, and I believe this is a possibility as well, put through legislation similar to what happened with Hong Kong that will strengthen and accelerate that process. So I believe what the United States has done is made a grave miscalculation by believing they could provoke a stable economy, a united society, and one that is guided by a central plan, one that is guided by true and genuine principles. This is where China kind of shines. It's a country that is guided by genuine principles and united around them. So now China will unite around how to actually put into action a plan that will accelerate the reunification process and that will prevent, by way of military, economic, and political policy, prevent another instance like this from happening. And that's why you see Germany, I'm sure Europe, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hand wringing over this in an attempt to come out ahead of it and to use the China bad, to use the China aggression, to use the blame China model, the blame China politics to get out ahead of this and try to frame this as, oh, if Nancy Pelosi does it, we're all going to do it. And that's what China is going to be responding to, but China's going to do it methodically. So for those who were hoping for some kind of war, for some kind of incredible military response by China, I said it on the stream last night with Carl and with Xiang Yu, that was not really in the cards. I believed it was always going to be measured. Did I believe that her plane could have been diverted? Did I believe that they could have met her in the air if that was indeed a possibility and wouldn't cause some kind of a crisis in the air, which could happen with the way that these planes are fueled? Then I think that was on the table. But do I think that it was necessarily going to be the first option? No. I believe the option always was to use this as an example to show not just the population on the mainland, but to everyone in the world that the United States is willing to break these agreements and that this gives the basis for China to accelerate the reunification process. Because what many people don't understand, what liberals and right wingers and anti China forces the world over, what they don't understand is that China has actually abided by the one China policy and that China has an incredible amount of leverage as it grows, as it stabilizes, and as it becomes, right, a world leader in many different ways. China doesn't have to do what the United States does. There's a lot of projection always going on that China is going to do what the United States does because the United States does it, right? And China can fight in different ways. China can defend its sovereignty in all kinds of ways. The military option, honestly, is the last resort. Why is that? The People's Liberation Army celebrated its 95th anniversary, and the People's Liberation Army was never an invading force, and it was never an offensive force, and it really was never a force meant to do anything about the Asia-Pacific region in general. Now, indeed, Taiwan is a different question, and there were multiple Taiwan Straits crises, which it did indeed involve the PLA and the ROC administration, right? The KMT nationalists, right? Having open clashes. That did happen. But that happened many, 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 many decades ago when there was still a battle that the nationalists especially were trying to wage in terms of the one China, who would be the one China leader, right? Because the revolution placed the People's Republic of China, led by the Communist Party, into that rightful position. And the United States helped back the so-called Taiwan administration, the ROC, in trying to undermine that. And so that's where this history is. That's where all of this is rooted in. That's the history. And it's only been in the last couple of decades where it has been taken to an more extreme degree, where now Taiwan is becoming an identity, where it's becoming a so-called independence movement. That is really the making of a color revolution, the making of US meddling, and China is more concerned about how it can defend its own territorial integrity, its own sovereignty. It is not concerned about how it can kind of wipe away and wash away the internal politics in Taiwan. So China made a calculation and said, we are going to take this step by step by step. And so now the steps are going to be put into place. I firmly believe that we will see a political reform. We will see military exercises. We will see a ramping up of demonstrations that, in fact, China actually has all the cards. The United States can't defend Taiwan, quote unquote, militarily. It can use nuclear weapons to kind of end humanity, but it has no other option. The United States cannot wage an open war with China. How many times has this been admitted by the ruling class itself? The Rand Corporation in 2016 said the United States would be wiped away, that it would, that China would wipe the floor with them, would wipe the floor with the U.S. military. And what they won't say, though, is why. They won't say that China has a modern military that people support, a government that people support, and technology that rivals the United States. They don't usually put it in those terms, right? Maybe they'll hit one of those, usually the technology, usually the military might, because you can more easily frame that as China being bad, China being kind of like this equal aggressor. They won't tell you about how people view the People's Liberation Army as a defender of the country. Unlike here, where the US military says we're defending national security interests, we're defending our freedoms, and they go around and destroy the planet on that basis without no attention to the interests of the United States and the vast majority in it. It's the military of the United States is an imperialist military. It's not there to serve human needs. People in the PLA in China, they plant trees. They defend the country in other ways. Actually, the military serves as the police in some respects, but a police that isn't armed to the teeth, ready to kill civilians and kill Chinese people. It is there to protect the integrity of the revolution from which the People's Liberation Army led. That is what the People's Liberation Army is really all about. And so all of those folks who thought, oh yeah, the People's Liberation Army is going to confront the United States and get into some kind of shooting war, they were always mistaken. There was not going to be a shooting war. That would only cause economic, political, and all sorts of other disasters for China. And China doesn't need to do it. China is going to continue on its own path. China is going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to get closer with Russia. You saw the Russian Foreign Ministry, I hope. They came out in solidarity with China. China is not going to lose friends over this. It's only going to gain. There's very few. There's only a couple of countries, I can't even name them, who diplomatically recognize the ROC Taiwan Authority, right? Only a couple left after the whole diplomatic sanctions that the United States led from 49 to 71. Now there's only a couple left because UN Resolution 2758 since 1971 says the People's Republic of China is the rightful leader of China. So China is in the driver's seat here. The United States, this Pelosi move, it was always an act of desperation in political theater. It's all about building up the political environment for this new Cold War ahead of midterm elections, ahead of an economic crisis, ahead of all sorts of things. It's the United States that is very fragile right now. The United States is in the throes of an economic crisis, this inflation crisis. What are they saying? No end in sight. No end in sight to the inflation crisis. More people are living paycheck to paycheck. Real wages are down. Joe Biden's administration politically is losing popularity, losing popularity, losing popularity every single month. The Democratic Party is looking like it's going to be swept out of Congress. So then why would Nancy Pelosi take this trip? Why would she try to do it in secret? Why would she try to do it in April? Remember April? April is when these numbers became very apparent that Joe Biden's administration and the Democrats were tanking. And Nancy Pelosi wanted to do this in April, and then she caught COVID-19. So she delayed it till now, till the beginning of August. And now it's transpired. And I think what we're going to see is that this isn't going to have the intended effect. While Mike Pompeo and Kevin McCarthy and the GOP will swoon over Pelosi over this because they're China hawks, it's not going to move the needle at all politically. What it's going to do, though, is it's going to boost the military industrial complex. It's going to provide even more fertile ground for this new Cold War. That's what Pelosi wanted to accomplish. She wanted to accomplish she wanted to strengthen the ideological underpinnings of this war on China. And China knows it. And that's why China is going to take resolute, firm, consistent, and methodical measures. They're not going to flail in the wind. They're not going to look like a fish out of water. They're going to take measures that matter, measures that keep things stable, prevent conflict, and defend the integrity, the self-determination, and the sovereignty of China. That's what they're going to do, and that's what they've done. So that was my initial reaction to all of this. I was looking to see how this would actually go down, because we know that the United States is not a good faith actor. We know that people like Nancy Pelosi are really keen on shenanigans. We know what Nancy Pelosi did in 1991 in Beijing. She went to Beijing in 1991, 2 years after the Tiananmen Square incident, and made a scene. And she did it for the same reasons, which was to come out looking like a China hawk, to build political capital in Washington, D.C., and to fan the flames of anti-communism and anti-China sentiment in a very delicate time, to project American exceptionalism and to build the rudiments of what exists today. Because even though U.S.-China relations were much more solid in that period, the Tiananmen Square incident was one of these flashpoints where there were cracks, and there's always been cracks, right? People are mistaken when they believe that somehow China and the United States were just good friends during the normalization process. China was trying to be a good faith actor. China was trying to secure its interests. China was trying to end diplomatic and economic strangulation led by the United States. China was trying to survive amid complicated global conditions in the throes of a Sino-Soviet split, right? In very delicate world political situation. And normalization was always, right, about mutual, how do two contending forces, two opposing, right, in terms of their character, not necessarily China being like, well, we're opposing the United States, we want to overthrow them, not conflicting in that way, but two different systems, how do they get along? And normalization was about trying to balance those contradictions where a lot of them are not reconcilable. So now we're seeing what happens when the United States, which was always going to be the force to expose that. The United States is an imperialist system. It was always going to be in the vanguard of trying to undermine the very process that it put into place for its short-term benefit. Now that China is on the rise, now that China is more sovereign, is stronger, and is building up what is a stable socialist and prosperous socialist economy, now China must be dealt with. That's how the United States is looking at China. It isn't that they don't want to profit from investment in China anymore, from the Chinese economy. No, U.S. corporations would love to continue to profit from China's economy. However, they don't want to do so. Read anything George Soros writes. They don't want to do so on the basis that it strengthens China's socialist market economy. They don't want to do it on that basis. A lot of the China hawks have a huge problem with that. That is what they have a problem with. So that's what we should take from this, is that there are root causes to this. Taiwan is just a chip. Taiwan gets this overemphasis because it is the most militarized part of this regional kind of catastrophe in the making that the United States is facilitating, this militarization of the region. Taiwan is just the most intense case, and Taiwan is a chip, a flashpoint in this war. And the United States definitely, as we've seen Biden continuously reveal, they are looking to use Taiwan as kind of the front and center of what would happen if there was a military confrontation. And to me, what Pelosi was doing was testing the waters on behalf of big tech, on behalf of the military industrial complex, testing these waters. How hot is it? How far can we go? How can we disrespect China? How far can we take that? I believe they made a grave miscalculation. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong in this, but I believe that the consequences that will come to bear on the United States in regards to this move will be far greater than the benefits. And that's because the empire is in decline. So that's just my brief response. And now I want to get into, as you're continuing to like the video, continuing to hit that subscribe button, continuing to hit the notifications bell so you know when I come on. And of course, if possible, and if you're able, supporting this channel at patreon.com/DannyHaiphong. As you're doing all of that, I want to show you a few things. I want to give you an idea of how the media responded in China versus the United States. So I'm going to read an article from the Global Times, and then I'm going to read an article from CNN and how they responded to this, because I think it's important to get both perspectives to see the differences. This is how we can understand this situation better. So let's pull up the Global Times, all right? So the Global Times, as you know, Hu Xinjin has been very strong on this issue. He has been talking a lot about, and this isn't from him, but he's the editor at the Global Times. He's talking a lot about the consequences of this. And so the Global Times, right, as being kind of the tabloid of the People's Daily, they wrote this article in the aftermath of Pelosi's visit. The U.S. bears full responsibility for all consequences of Taiwan visit, China warns. Being an enemy to 1.4 billion Chinese over Taiwan question comes to no good end, they say. So, as the world closely followed the visit of U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan on Tuesday evening, which is widely described as provocative and dangerous, the Biden administration gave more chicanery in distancing itself by stressing it was her personal choice and continuing the hollowing out of the One China principle, which serves as the foundation for U.S.-China relations. Chinese officials and experts warned that all the consequences of this highly dangerous and provocative move will be borne by Washington, and such a visit will also forever change the cross-strait situation and deliver a destructive impact on already difficult U.S.-China relations. Chinese Foreign Minister Xi Feng summoned U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns on early Wednesday morning to protest against Pelosi's visit to Taiwan Island. The nature of Pelosi's visit is extremely vicious, and the consequences are very grave. The Chinese side will not sit idly by, Xi told Burns. Shortly after Pelosi arrived in Taipei's Songshan Airport, 5 Chinese authorities, including the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, Taiwan Affairs Office of the CPC, Central Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee of the Chinese Political Consultative Conference, National Committee, and the Ministry of National Defense issued statements condemning the visit, noting it seriously damages the political foundation of U.S.-China relations and sends a wrong message to Taiwan independence forces. On Tuesday evening, just a few hours ahead of the planned arrival time of Pelosi in Taiwan, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi stressed China's solemn position, warning that some U.S. politicians who selfishly play with fire on the Taiwan question will become enemies to 1.4 billion Chinese people, and it won't meet with a good end. This serves as a final warning to the U.S. to stop from falling off the cliff, experts said. So there's a lot of condemnation going on, obviously, right? Talking about the 3 joint communiques, talking about how this is really a rupture. This is a break. This is a big deal, guys. This is a big deal. This is a break in what has been the status quo. And the Biden administration, the Democrats are facilitating it. So no matter what you think about China's response, oh, it wasn't aggressive enough, oh, this and that, just know that the material conditions, the material reality of this is that the United States has begun, has facilitated. They already were facilitating this, but through this, right, this is dialectic materialism. So with every contradiction that bores out and plays out, struggle, right, and with every struggle among opposing forces that plays out on a long-term basis, like what's been happening with his new Cold War, there will always be ruptures, right? Ruptures, antagonisms that come up and that could change the landscape forever. And that is what this was. This is one of those moments where this long-term global strategy of full spectrum dominance has produced this situation, which will change the relations here. So U.S. officials have been increasingly taking bold actions to hollow out the one China policy, adopting a salami slicing approach to erode the principle, for instance, by removing the wording on supporting Taiwan independence in the U.S. State Department website section on relations with Taiwan in May, playing tricks to obscure the perception that China has the absolute sovereignty over the island, and frequently hyping up the false claims that Taiwan Straits is international waters and sending lawmakers to visit the island. So there you go, some more context. The State Department did do this in May. They erased the section about not supporting Taiwan independence. That's not there in the State Department briefing on relations with Taiwan. The U.S. is unwilling to talk about the legal basis of the Taiwan question. As for the legal basis, no matter it's international law or the 3G joint communiques between China and the U.S., their arguments won't make any sense. So this is not about logic. This is about power projection and imperialism. So really what the United States is doing here, as they say, so let's talk about the consequences, because we know about the Taiwan's Relations Act, which is the justification for the arms sales, pumping Taiwan with weaponry, right? That's the legislative protocol that kind of undermines, actually doesn't kind of, it does undermine the one China principle and the 6 assurances, which was produced after the 1992 consensus. These 6 assurances are all about overriding China's one China principle. Not China's one China principle, but the one China principle. So the U.S. is to bear consequences, all right? And they say Chinese experts believe that China's strategic view is greater than just playing a game of hawk and chicken with Pelosi on her so-called surprise visit to the island. China will use the provocative move by the U.S. to irreversibly change the Taiwan Straits situation and speed up the reunification process, which is much more important than Pelosi's visit. If the U.S. believes Pelosi's adventurous move can open a door for Washington on the Taiwan question, that would be naive, said experts, noting that it could only end the U.S.'s strategy of coercion on Taiwan. They added that no one should underestimate China's determination for unification and rejuvenation, and the Russia-Ukraine crisis has just let the world see the consequence of pushing a major power into a corner. So even China is saying, watch what happens. Watch what happened with Russia and Ukraine. Russia responded. We will respond as well. China won't allow another case like Pelosi's visit to happen again, which means we won't allow this visit to set a bad example for more countries such as UK, France, and Germany to follow suit, further hollowing out our sovereignty over Taiwan. As part of consecutive warnings, China's foreign ministry spokesperson warned again Tuesday that the U.S. should abandon any attempt of playing the Taiwan card and faithfully abide by the one China principle. If the U.S. insists on pursuing the wrong course of action, it will assume full responsibility for all serious consequences arising therefrom. So there you have it. That's the response of the Chinese media. And then I want to show you a thread. I think it's a really good thread by by Bidet Marksman, a really funny name. But I think this thread gets to what I believe is kind of the consequences that are going to be born from this, right? Because China has a lot of options here. And this thread, I think, shows what they are. So let me get to that. Keep liking the video, like the video. So professional hog groomer. So saying that events have been sparked that have not even begun yet. And so here is, of course, Carl pointed out that there will be a military exercise happening on August 4th, and that China announced that directly after she touched down. and they will majorly disrupt Taiwan's maritime industry and require expensive rerouting of many commercial aviation routes through the region. So here you have the map, right? So ship traffic density map in the Taiwan Strait. There you have kind of these points, right? And you see where the military operations are going to be happening. So if if China is militarily doing things around here, as you see, it's going to be disruptive, right? It could be economically, it could hurt Taiwan and cause problems. So it's a show of we will respond to this. We will. These are very serious responses. They will provide China with advanced intel about Taiwanese military response times and capabilities, all while stress testing their military endurance by pushing them to maintain a higher state of readiness not seen since 1996 is third Taiwan Strait crisis. But with heightened military preparedness on all sides comes increased risks of inciting an event that plays into the U.S.'s hands. The side willing to sacrifice civilians for geopolitical goals will always have an advantage in this regard, so beware of atrocity propaganda. So, you know, with China's resolute and firmness, they're going to deal with the consequences. I agree with that. There will be consequences, but China understands, and I think this trip really taught them that the one China policy will not be respected, and that the United States views its new Cold War far more importantly than its normalization process, right? That normalization process has been completely trampled on, and now we are moving into a war situation. So beyond military operations beginning this week, China has blocked imports of 180 Taiwanese food. Similar targeted economic sanctions are likely against the U.S. Further afield, China may decide to provide more overt material support for Russia in the current Ukraine conflict. I don't know about that. I don't know if they'll provide more support to Russia more than the strategic partnership. I'm not necessarily in agreement with that. I don't know that. But I do think that it is true that we will see China economically move differently. It will move away from integration with Taiwan in key sectors if it means that it will protect China's sovereignty, and it will, of course, strengthen what it's already been doing everywhere else, which is deepen relations outside of the United States' sphere. So this is just an acceleration of a process the U.S. can't control. So it should be seen as a problem for the U.S., and it will be seen as a problem. Knowing this will be the likely response, the West is gearing up to stoke further escalation. The EU is now signaling they are preparing a plan to sanction China, while the UK plans to jump on the provocation bandwagon by sending their own delegates. Yeah, Germany is going to try to do the same thing. They're going to try to get out ahead, as I said before. So for all the anticipation this opening move generated, China was never going to do something brash or escalatory as shooting down Pelosi's plane. As I said, I agreed with that. Contrary to disappointed reactions, China has not blinked, made empty threats, or allowed red lines to be stepped on. They simply instinctively didn't flinch at a blatant provocation. The weeks ahead will demonstrate that China, led by the CPC and guided by the principles of dialectical materialism, has many points of leverage at their disposal now that the West has exposed their intentions. It's easy to fall into the role of spectator, as events like this provide a glimmer of hope that the current profoundly unjust order will be replaced within our lifetime. But it's important to resist the trap of becoming a passive observer for cheering on destruction. So, I mean, to me, that's a really good, very brief analysis, just showing what I agree with in terms of the approach here. The approach is not to behave like the United States, but to do things methodically, right? Taiwan can't afford to not be more integrated with the mainland. It can't afford that. So any economic decision, and this is different from sanctions, it's not like China's trying to strangulate certain sectors. What China is doing is saying, we have the right to say we don't want to trade with you anymore if this is going to be how it goes. That's not necessarily, I mean, to me, that's not necessarily sanctions. That's just making decisions based on how good your friends are, right? So if the Taiwan authorities want to play ball with the United States, they can play ball with them. They can trade you. Hey, take what the United States has to offer. The United States has nothing to offer, right? So Taiwan's authorities are going to be in big trouble. As you know, Shang Yu said, they're already in big trouble with the chip sector, with the semiconductor industry. That's going to be a huge play. I believe, and I firmly believe, that no matter how strong, right, the propaganda, the independent sentiment, all of that, becomes in the heads of people. We have to remember this. The heads of people are not what drives politics. Politics don't come from our heads. That's idealism. So no matter how reactionary the propaganda renders politics within within the internal politics of Taiwan, no matter how much that happens, we're talking about a fundamentally different situation than, let's say, the United States, which backs up propaganda with brutal force. While Taiwan can only rely on propaganda because if it were to enact a brutal force, like say in the early KMT days, Taiwan would this whole thing would not last. The United States wouldn't be able to say, "Oh, we love the democracy over there." No, they wouldn't be able to say that, right? So they don't say that about Saudi Arabia. We love the democracy. So if Taiwan's authorities were acting like that, so it's a really fragile. It's a really fragile situation. They're trying to make Taiwan into this kind of neoliberal, so-called democratic, quote unquote, Western style government system, just led by forces that will do whatever the United States wants them to do. And that's a really difficult situation to maintain in a scenario where you're trying to wage war against China. It's not going to work. China has all the cards. There are a lot of China hawks out there. When I said that on Twitter, they just all come out and say, "What do you mean? China doesn't have any cards. Do you know how powerful the U.S. military is?" The U.S. military is a paper tiger. The U.S. military has not won. When was the last time the United States has won a global conflict that it has instigated where there has been more stability and more benefits than there have been costs? I can't name it. People want to talk about World War II, right? The United States sat that thing out for as long as the United States could so that it could undermine Europe's colonial and imperialist position. So it could allow the fascists to beat back the Soviet Union and Western Europe for as long as they could, and then stepped in to say, "Oh, well, we're involved now. We can play kind of like this fake hero shit, and we can come out looking like we were participating in a good war." No more. That was a one-off. If there's anything like a one-off, that was it. The United States has wreaked instability, has destroyed societies, and that model won't work with China. It will not work because China's military is too strong, its society is too united, its economy is too important and valuable. It is not going to work. No matter how much the most hawkish elements in the Pentagon, the CIA, wherever, no matter how much they think in their heads that scenario could happen and come out with any kind of long-term benefits or even short-term benefits in the United States, no, it won't. It won't. Right? It won't happen. So that was the China side of it, right? That's kind of what we're seeing in terms of the response. Now let's see how the CNN reacted. So CNN, like the video, keep liking the video, keep doing that. CNN's a joke. So U.S. Speaker Pelosi lands in Taiwan amid threats of Chinese retaliation. So she landed on Tuesday, marking a significant show of support for Taiwan despite China's threat of retaliation for the visit. Pelosi's stop is the first from a U.S. House Speaker in 25 years. It comes at a low point in China relations. Pelosi and the congressional delegation accompanied her, saying in a statement that the visit honors America's unwavering commitment to supporting Taiwan's vibrant democracy. Our discussions with Taiwan leadership focus on reaffirming our support for our partner and promoting our shared interests, including advancing a free and open Indo-Pacific region. So that's just the motto. That's the Indo-Pacific strategy showing through. So China responded by announcing military exercises with bellicose rhetoric, warning that the speaker's visit has a severe impact on the political foundation of China-U.S. relations and infringes upon China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So it undermines. We read that. China's foreign ministry, very angry. Taiwan's national defense said, so you see the source difference here. So China's not messing around with Taiwan authorities. They're not saying Taiwan authorities are giving us facts here. That's what the U.S. media does. They only cite Taiwan authorities on any matter of factual importance. They'll put in the statements of the Chinese foreign ministry, but they'll never put anything of factual importance from Chinese media or the Chinese government. But Taiwan's Ministry of Defense says that 21 Chinese warplanes made incursions into the ADIZ, That little thing formed in World War II by the United States, which has absolutely no basis in international law. No one recognizes it. It includes mainland China in the so-called air defense identification zone. But here you have CNN, of course, soft peddling imperialism, when there have been literally hundreds, if not thousands, of spy planes, of sorties flying through China's airspace on behalf of this new Cold War aggression involving Taiwan. So here you have China frequently sends warplanes into Taiwan's self-declared ADIZ. Well, maybe that's because there are spy planes. Maybe because there's all sorts of military aggression. You see nothing on the United States' military aggression. Nothing. And that's what I want to show you. Okay? So the U.S. ambassador was spoken to, Nicholas Burns, by Deputy Foreign Minister Xi Feng. So we know that. Okay? And so Wednesday, the next day, Tsai Ing-wen, right? That's probably might be happening right now because it's 12-hour difference. Tsai Ing-wen and Pelosi will meet. So I just want to show you, and John Kirby here says there's no reason for this to be a pretext or whip up some sort of a military action, said John Kirby, right? The National Security Council coordinator. And as you heard from Carl, he says the reason for that is this is just straight policy. This is just regular, ordinary policy of the United States. Wrong, 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 wrong. If you need a law passed very recently within the last few years, you need a law that passed in order to go to Taiwan, then obviously it's not a long-standing policy. But there you have just, it's all China's aggression. It's all China's aggression against Taiwan, right? So that's how CNN frames things. And I want to show you, this will be the final word on the Taiwan question, because this is the most important aspect of it, in my opinion, for us anti-imperialists to remember. We can get into the internal politics of Taiwan. We can talk about how U.S. and China and Taiwan have related to each other, cross-straits relations. We can talk about all of that. We can talk about this history, right? The revolution, counter-revolution. Yeah, sure, we should talk about that. But number one on the priority is showing and demonstrating just how bellicose the United States is, just how much this conflict is rooted in what the United States is doing, not China. China is not the enemy here. China is not the instigator. It is not the instigator. Okay, I repeat, China is not the instigator. I'm going to show you very briefly, very, very briefly. It doesn't even take much time at all to show you how China is not the instigator with Taiwan. So I'm just going to show you 3 pieces, okay? This is not hard. This is all mainstream sources, all right? So let's go back to the Taiwan Straits crisis of 1958 when the United States was militarizing the island again, or militarizing the island with the so-called ROC administration, the KMT leadership, against China, trying to stave off reunification. The U.S. considered a nuclear strike on China in 1958 over the Taiwan crisis, classified documents showed. So this was May 24, 2021. This was Daniel Ellsberg, leaked papers. He leaked these papers, violated the Espionage Act, leaked these papers showing that U.S. military planners pushed for nuclear strikes on mainland China in 1958 to protect Taiwan, quote unquote, from an invasion of communist forces. Classified documents posted online by Daniel Ellsberg show. U.S. planners assumed that the Soviet Union would aid China and retaliate with nuclear weapons, a price they deemed worth paying to protect Taiwan, according to the document. Former military analyst Ellsberg posted online the classified portion of top-secret document on the crisis that had been partially declassified in 1975, but it was so redacted that this was underplayed. Ellsberg, now 90, is famous for his 1971 leak, blah, 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 blah. Had an invasion taken place, General Nathan, so Ellsberg told the Times he copied the top-secret Taiwan crisis study in the 1970s and released it as tensions mount between the U.S. and China over Taiwan. Had an invasion taken place, General Nathan Twining, the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, made clear, quote, that the United States would have used nuclear weapons against Chinese air bases to prevent a successful air interdiction campaign, the document's authors wrote. If this did not stop an invasion, then there was no alternative but to conduct nuclear strikes deep into China as far north as Shanghai. In the event, President Eisenhower decided to rely initially on conventional weapons. So they that didn't happen, of course. That didn't transpire, thank goodness. How the United States is at the root of this crisis. The United States is at the root of this crisis. It's at the root of the militarization and the violence and the potential war that we could all be in. So let me show you what else the United States has been up to in Taiwan. And this is also within the last year that this has been revealed. We know now that U.S. military personnel has doubled. They've doubled in Taiwan in the past year alone. So in the year 2021, it's doubled its unofficial military presence in Taiwan over the past year in what specialists described as the latest signal to China that Taiwan's future remains a priority. This is the voice of America, the voice of the CIA. The increase from 20 personnel to 39 between December 31st and September 30th came with little fanfare, but it did coincide with a rare public acknowledgement by President Tsai Ing-wen in October that the U.S. military maintains a small presence in Taiwan. Active duty deployments now include 29 Marines, as well as 2 service members from the Army, 3 from the Navy, and 5 from the Air Force, according to the Pentagon's Defense Manpower Data Center. While the U.S. has not disclosed what the military personnel are doing, at the very least, it is sending a strong signal to China and this is from a Taiwan-based research organization specializing in disinformation. It's subtle but unmistakable, they told the Voice of America. So the United States doubled its military personnel inside of Taiwan over the past year, over a 1-year period. And then you had the reports, which have been denied in some respects. But the Wall Street Journal published this. That U.S. troops have been deployed in Taiwan for at least a year. This was October 12th, 2021. So they might be conducting training. So that's the difference here. Small presence of Americans secretly training local forces marks concern over China's years-long military buildup and recent moves. So again, right, a special operations unit and a contingent of Marines have been secretly operating in Taiwan to train military forces there, U.S. officials said, as part of the efforts to shore up the island's defenses as concern regarding Chinese aggression mounts. 24 members of U.S. Special Operations and Support Troops are conducting training for small units of Taiwan's ground forces, the officials said. The U.S. Marines are working with local maritime forces on small boat training. The American forces have been operating in Taiwan for at least a year. So that's a provocation. I mean, this is all warmongering. This is all a warmongering provocation. All of this, special operations, doubling military personnel. The United States is the problem here, right? And we're told over and over and over again that it is China that's the problem. But no one wants to say Yankees need to go home. What does the United States, what right does the United States have to be in this region at all? Any part of the region, let alone a contested territory that has been legally recognized as part of China. The One China principle and the One China policy, which is enshrined in the United Nations, which has been agreed upon by the U.S. and China both, right? What right does it have to do any of this? Well, the United States in 1979, when they passed the Taiwan Relations Act, and of course the Taipei Act recently, in the last couple of years, all of this legislation that is meant to try to pry the island into a neo-colonial status, into a status that prioritizes U.S. interests and that really just exploits and uses Taiwan as what Carl said, right? An unsinkable naval carrier, right? That's what they view it as. That's what the United States views Taiwan as. So, I mean, what else is there to say about this, right? This was a dangerous moment. We just witnessed a watershed moment in history. And we're lucky that China did not respond in the way that Russia responded to Ukraine in the special military operation. Because unlike the special military operation, which could be contained and where NATO can kind of remain mired in this endless proxy war, there is no such possibility with a conflict over Taiwan. So that's the difference. the United States can use NATO as its spear to economically and militarily wage a proxy war, while Taiwan, that's a red line that is a direct, it is akin to if the United States was backing forces in Crimea and we saw military operations by the United States in Crimea after the referendum, right? That is what it is akin to. We know, of course, that the proxy forces that the United States is backing in Ukraine want to take back Crimea, but there's no such militarization by the United States in Crimea. So does that, I hope that makes sense, that now that Crimea is part of the Russian Federation, to try to directly do that, which wouldn't be possible anyway, but try to directly interfere in Crimea in that way would be a blatant violation of Russia's sovereignty. Well, the way that the United States is behaving with Taiwan is, to me, an escalation beyond what has happened with the Russia-Ukraine situation. And it's just that China is in such a position that it can bide time and it can take methodical and measured steps, which will hasten the reunification process and prevent the unthinkable. But the United States, remember this, if you remember anything from this stream, remember that the United States wants the unthinkable, that there is a large element of the ruling class that sees profit, that sees an opportunity, that right? Full spectrum dominance is about getting rid of any socialist, any alternative economic and political system that arises now and in the future. So the opportunity is to try to destabilize China, even if the calculations don't add up. It doesn't matter, right? The interests are embedded. It's their class interests. It's not about strategy and what's right and what's wrong, morality. No, that's idealism. We got to get that out of our heads. The United States is no ruling class, no imperialist ruling class, no capitalist ruling class thinks in terms of morality. Doesn't think about the values, or it's all talking points. It's all bluster. It's all ideology. It's all window dressing, right? For what the reality is, which is China is a quote unquote threat because China is moving in a different direction, a socialist direction, a leader in the multipolar world order that is emerging, a steward and a champion of self-determination. That's the quote unquote China threat. That's why Taiwan is critically important, and everything else comes secondary and falls within, from the chip sector, economic and high tech, so-called quote unquote competition, to the separatism that's being supported and fermented in trips like this, to the propaganda war against China. All of it is supposed to lead to this end game, which is any and all means to necessary to destabilize and undermine the Chinese Revolution, the People's Republic of China, the Communist Party of China, and all of its allies, the 95 to 98% of people in China who support that government. That's what it is to undermine. And it's a part of a larger global strategy to undermine every single force, class force, that has been successful in charting a new course in history. Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, Eritrea, Zimbabwe. We can go on and on and on and on and on of these forces, movements, while maybe different in character, speak to the same thing. Russia, right? Speak to the same phenomenon. The end of the American empire, the end of imperialist influence, the transition from unipolar U.S. domination of monopoly and finance capital to a world order that can allow for the oppressed peoples of the world and the workers of the world to determine their own fate, whatever that will be, and whatever struggle must be waged to determine that. But when imperialism is in the equation, we have to remember, if we're principled, we have to remember that imperialism is the principal contradiction. It's a principal contradiction here with regard to Taiwan, and it's not Chinese imperialism. It is U.S.-led imperialism. The United States and its lackeys trying to undermine and weaken China. That's what this is all about. We always have to go back to that. Always. We have to go back to that. And we have to remember, and I'm going to try to end on this segment. Let's look at a few things that this China bad narrative is promoting and prompting. Let's look at this, okay? And I think I'm going to have to save the Obama segment because it's a longer segment I'm going to have with you all. I'm going to save that for another stream, which will probably be next weekend. I'll be publishing clips and whatnot in the interim, but I'll be away, and I don't think I'm going to bring my equipment for a couple of days. So I'll be doing other things. Maybe I'll do a call-in. Maybe I'm going to be I want to get back into writing. So I'll be taking a few days off of streaming. But as I transition, you keep liking the video and you keep hitting that subscribe button and notifications bell. And of course, consider contributing on Patreon, patreon.com/Dhaiphong. That's how you support this work. I want to pull up a few events that have happened, which have been completely diminished by the U.S.'s reckless trip to Taiwan. And I think this is probably the most important one when it comes to politics in the United States at the broad level, the class war, the broad class war. So this came out, and when we talk about China being used as a distraction, we have to look at things like this. We have to look at what's happening that really affects politics, at a broad level that the ruling class cares about. Because the ruling class sees the most oppressed and the most exploited of the working class as disposable. They're not considered important when they're not in motion in terms of movements. But when there's a broad economic crisis, then there is more attention. So let me show you what's happened. So on August 1st, unrelenting inflation, says CNBC, is driving up costs, leaving more Americans living paycheck to paycheck. With no break in sight for rising prices, nearly 2/3 of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, according to a recent report. Even top earners say they are stretched thin. Over 1 month, average savings dropped from $11,274 in May to $10,757 in June. And so that means people are losing money. What little wealth they have, they're losing it. Inflation has caused economic hardship for workers across all income levels. 61% of Americans, roughly 157 million adults, live paycheck to paycheck, according to a new Lending Lab report. That's up from 58% who reported living paycheck to paycheck in May. A year ago, that number of adults who felt stretched too thin was 55%. And so those even earning $200,000 or more, 36% say they are living paycheck to paycheck. And so inflation is the ongoing problem. Inflation being the ongoing problem, although average hourly earnings are up 5.1% from a year ago, prices have been rising even faster, especially for groceries and, until quite recently, gasoline. So paychecks can't stretch as far. 9.1% in June was the consumer price index. Okay, so there you have it. More people are living paycheck to paycheck now. That's a problem politically, because usually when that happens, it means that the ruling so-called majoritarian party, whichever political party has a majority in Congress, usually means they're in trouble, because people do vote on economics. They do. It might be misguided. It might not be the correct way we need to be fighting for our interests, but they do. Enough economic frustration, you can have Donald Trump in office. That's what happened. It wasn't all racist red meat. While it played a significant role, we have to look at the infusion of the economic narrative that was welded, right? That was bound to all of that. That narrative said that the United States was in an economic situation which led to immense frustrations. And it's not just that the Trump voters being more motivated. It was working class people as a whole being less motivated, being less likely to care about politics. When economic frustrations are higher, people will vote with no participation at all. They'll jump party, they'll jump ship, they'll swing, or they'll just, not give a crap. And that is the result of economic frustrations, especially in a time where people don't feel like there's a lot of channels for them to go to change that situation. It just feels out of control, out of people's control, And so the frustrations will get channeled in certain ways that do hurt certain sections of the establishment. So the Democratic Party, with this paycheck to paycheck situation, is likely to take a big hit politically. And it's important to note that constantly hyping China, that it's China's fault, China's aggressive, China is undermining the economy. Look at what Mike Pompeo says on Twitter all the time. He's auditioning for probably a presidential run in the GOP, saying that China is undermining the U.S. militarily, economically, politically, everything, technology, everything. China, 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 China. And that's because of situations like this. You got to get the blame off of the United States. Can't have that capitalism thing being blamed. Can't have that imperialism thing being blamed, right? It has to be China. And so while that's happening, there's also this happening. McCarthyism. We have McCarthyism happening. We have the African People's Socialist Party, right, being raided. We have the FBI, federal investigators raided homes Friday morning. All right. While this all was happening with China, building up Pelosi, we have the FBI doing stuff like this. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement and the APSP saw the FBI perform a violent raid with flash grenades and drones 5 a.m. Friday morning, St. Louis and Florida. At a news conference, Chairman Omali Yeshitela said he and his wife were handcuffed during the raid as investigators searched their homes. He said the FBI threw flash grenades into his home and performed a raid without knocking or showing a search warrant. Yeshitela said the FBI believes the Uhuru movement in APSP may somehow be involved in Russia's tampering with elections. What they've claimed is that they are indicting someone, a Russian nationalist who's in Russia. They claim that they were investigating the APSP that I lead in the Uhuru movement because some association that we might have with the Russian government. So this is all about there's a particular organization that used to do delegations. I believe it's called the Movement for Globalization or the Globalization Movement. And, I believe Glenn Ford was also, I don't know if Glenn Ford went. I don't think he did, but it's a anti-globalization movement of Russia. I know a lot of journalists have gone on this. A lot of activists have gone on delegations to Russia, especially during that sensitive time. He went in 2014, which was a huge period, right? They were queuing Ukraine. There's a lot going on. There's escalations toward Russia, military encirclement, sanctions, and it was under Obama. And so a lot of people on the left are very interested in Russia and went. I remember this. I didn't go. I wish I would have went. But now people are being accused because of Russiagate, because of the Ukraine conflict, being accused in a McCarthyist manner and being harassed in this way. And it's not a surprise that the Black liberation movement is being targeted, right? Because the Black liberation movement is always the principal target of this kind of assault. The FBI is doing what it has been doing for decades upon decades, targeting Black movement organizations, Black liberation leaders, activists, organizations. And when you take a stand, right, when you take a stand that goes against the grain of the empire, better believe that if that stand is coming from a Black radical movement, that it will be one of the first targeted or will receive the harshest treatment. I mean, that's the example that political prisoners in U.S. prisons right now, like Mumia Abu-Jamal, demonstrate that the harshest treatment will be reserved to Black people as an example of what will happen to all of us. And that's what isn't often said. It's an example of what will happen to all of us, which is why we had COINTELPRO turn into the Patriot Act, turn into the War on Terror, turn into mass surveillance. COINTELPRO was the roots of that. We have to understand it like that. That's what's happening here now. And so China, Russia, by blaming these two rising powers for everything, stuff like this, economic immiseration, racist repression, the militarization of society, all of that can happen without any fanfare. Pelosi isn't going to be held accountable for this. Is Nancy Pelosi going to be held accountable for what's happening in her district in San Francisco? I covered it here, the rampant escalation in policing, in racist policing, racist stops, the stopping of Black people, of Latinos, at rates 3, 4, 5 times that of white people? Is she going to address that? No. Nancy Pelosi is a hawk. She's a corporatist. She's a capitalist. She's completely beholden to finance and big tech, and she is doing the empire's bidding, and it is coming at the expense of really critical issues. And that's why we have to dump the Democrats. We have to not fall into any pressure about third party this, third party that. No, we have to be independent. We have to develop a real, true, broad left, which will inevitably have to be led by real, actual socialists, not democratic socialists, not liberal socialists, not socialist light or socialist-ish, right? It has to be socialist through and through, meaning that the overall goal is to create a society where human need is over profit, and everything that we need to do and we need to build to do that must be prioritized. And we have to build up people's capacity to put that to the test, to put that principle to the test, to put it into practice. That's what we need to do. And China is a friend of this process. China is a friend of this process. China is a friend of this process. So, guys, it's really late here. I am not going to go as long as I went yesterday because I need to get to bed. But with that said, like this video, continue to share it. Hit that like button. Hit the like button. Make sure that if you can, first subscribe, hit the notifications bell. Be sure that if you can, this is a pitch. I always do this, at least at the end, in the middle, in the beginning. Subscribe at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong or on Substack, however you'd like. But Patreon is the best way. Support this work. I'm still, trying to battle the economic crisis, trying to keep things stable. I'm going to move to Rockfin soon. That's going to be exciting. I just got to get things going. I had a meeting about that. So be on the lookout for Rockfin. Going to, probably Rumble as well soon to keep everything kind of safe. But be on the lookout for Rockfin, where you'll be able to catch me if you don't want to catch me here. You'll be able to support me if you don't want to support me here, right? Trying to be more broad and to reach more people, all right? So with that said, everyone, salute. And I will see you probably, it'll be next weekend. I'm looking at Nixie Lamb. I'm looking at some guests to have. Nixie Lamb is a Hong Kong legislator, very incredible voice about Hong Kong and just China politics. And yeah, there are more guests I'm hoping to have on. So at any rate, stay well, everyone. Like the video as you leave, and be sure to subscribe if you can. Patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. Support this work. Support independent media. One love, as you say in the chat here. Cheers. Yes, love it, James. Stay well. You too. And thank you so much, Big Teal, for your moderation. If you'd like to do it other times, or someone else wants to do it, who's thank you. And one last thing, on Patreon, I'm going to start doing answers to questions. So I'm going to try to answer one question or more each stream, depending on how complex the questions are. So if you subscribe, that will be the feature that I do that's kind of like unique. I got away from doing any paywall content, but the one paywall thing I will do is if you're a subscriber on Patreon, I'm going to make posts weekly just for you to comment on, to get your questions answered during streams. I will research them, and especially if they're questions that really require a lot of work, I'll be sure to give them the attention they need and to go from there. All right. Big Teal said would like some co-mods. All right. Well, let's get some. Yeah. So anyway, Big Teal's a full timer for now. We can get some more. We got some real consistent people out here. I'm sure if you would like to moderate the chat, you can too. But yeah, questions for subscribers on Patreon. That's coming this week. I'll put out a post while I'm away. I'm not going to be streaming for a little bit. So while I'm away, you can do that. All right. All right, guys. Take care. Bye bye.